action. So I just scheduled this item. I remember that council member Hokama representing Lanai was pretty passionate about it, and it just came through the Lanai Planning Commission, and I didn't see a problem with putting it on the schedule. I didn't think that it would take too much time. So at this time, I'll entertain any discussion from the members. It seems like we have a cap system on its way, so I don't think there's a problem with just waiting until those get transmitted. It doesn't sound like it'll take more than 1 year. So any discussion, members? Member Molina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe more questions for the department. Basically, in terms of numbers, how many TVRs, short-term rentals, and B&Bs are currently permitted on Lanai? And in terms of any illegals on that island, I know it's a small community. I'm sure if somebody was operating illegally, that would certainly be addressed. So, can I get a response from the department on that, from Director McLean?
Yes, Councilmember Molina. There are no bed and breakfast homes on Lanai and none pending. There are 19 short-term rental home permits on Lanai, and there is 1 pending. We've had very little enforcement concerns on Lanai. There's sort of an open secret of an operation that doesn't have permits, but no one complains about it, and it's difficult to find ads. So that one just sleeping dogs, as you will.
And do you think, one more question, will a 1-year moratorium be enough to determine, enough to determine any regulations and so forth? Is that enough time, a year?
Well, we have been working for quite a while with the Lanai Planning Commission on proposed revisions to the B&B and STRH laws. And those bills were passed out of the Lanai Planning Commission. We've received 1 signed off by Court Counsel. We're waiting for the other one, which I expect to get any day. So we should be transmitting that to the council very soon with the minutes from those meetings. And so at that point, it'll be up to the council with this very full committee agenda when you're able to get to it. But I certainly, it's possible that you'd be able to get to it within a year, because it has very solid support with the community. I don't think those would be particularly controversial, but I've had that opinion about other things and been wrong, so we'll see.
Okay, great. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, any further discussion? We'll keep Member Rollins Fernandez and then Vice Chair Sinensi.
Hello, Chair. I was actually just going to wait for the motion to discuss. Sorry.
Okay. Member Sinensi.
Thank you, Chair. Just real quick, clarification. So it's a moratorium for 1 year, and within that year, it looks like a cap of 21 would just allow 1 more, either B&B or SDRH in that time.
21 more B&Bs.
So so the cap is each. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure thing. Guys look like you're ready for a recommendation? Okay.
Recommendation.
Members, I recommend passage of the proposed bill on first reading, a bill for an ordinance establishing Chapter 19.97 Maui County Code declaring a moratorium on transient accommodation permits on Lanai, incorporating any non-substantive revisions, and filing of County Communication 20-423.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Sugimura and seconded by Member Lee. Discussion, Member Sugimura?
I think it was well presented by hearing Mr. Hokama discuss this and understanding what's happening with the island as well as the department. I don't think we're going to wait very long for the moratorium, and I hope that this bill or for the caps to be established. And it looks like the bill is going through the process and recommendation from the Lanai Planning Commission. I hope we can take this up while Mr. Hokama is still with us on the council, because we're coming to the ending of the year and ending of his term. So thank you very much. Support this.
Do my best. Okay, Member Lee.
Oh no, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Member Rollins Fernandez, did you have a discussion item?
Mahalo, Chair. Yes. I am in full support of this motion. I from when this was first brought up, I thought it was a great idea, something that I wish we had done for Molokai, so that we could have prevented some of the work being done to permit some of the places on Molokai for STR. It was unanimously supported by the Lanai Planning Commission, and it's in line with their Lanai Community Plan. So I think we're on the right track with what we're doing for the Lanai community. So I fully support this. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Members, are we ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Looks like the member or the measure passes unanimously 7-0. So good job, Mr. Hokama. You got your bill passed.
Thank you, committee. We look forward to council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hokama. Okay, next up we have PSLU 59, transient vacation rentals in the apartment, light industrial, and heavy industrial districts. The committee is in receipt of the following: County Communication 20-246 from the Planning Director, transmitting a proposed bill to prevent the conversion of long-term use dwelling units into transient vacation rentals in the apartment, light industrial, and heavy industrial districts, and to prohibit new standalone apartment units in the light industrial and heavy industrial districts. Committee correspondence dated June 26, 2020 from the Planning Director, transmitting a revised proposed bill entitled A Bill for an Ordinance Amending Chapters 19.12, 19.24, 19.26, and 19.37 Maui County Code related to transient vacation rentals in the apartment districts and industrial districts and dwelling units in the industrial districts. Correspondence from the committee chair, transmitting proposed amendments to the bill noted in paragraph 2, and that was transmitted to Corporation Council. The committee may consider whether to recommend passage of the revised proposed bill in paragraph 2 on first reading with or without further revisions. The committee may also consider the filing of County Communication 20-246 and other related items. So the reason I scheduled this item, when I met with the department, this was one of their priority items among many, and I know they've been working really hard on it. They took a little heat here and there, and so I figured this would be a good time for redemption for themselves of having corrected what they corrected. And, being that housing is such a big issue, I agreed, any chance to save 20 units, 1,000 units, 3,000 units, we might as well act on it right away. So that's basically why I scheduled the item. So are there further questions or discussion from the members at this time? Member Molina.
Yeah, Madam Chair, can we get input from the department with regards to the proposed language from RAM?
Sure.
And also, I guess Ms. Leone, too, as well.
It should also be on the revised message from Director McLean. On page 2, she did say that she was supportive, but go ahead, Ms. Director McLean.
Thank you. Yes, we certainly agree with adding or payment of general excise tax and transient accommodation tax for transient vacation rental use to section 19.12.020 G2. And as Mr. Economu pointed out, that same language needs to be added to section 10 of the bill, and that's relates to existing operations being able to continue to operate. It also references the January 1st, 2020 date, and we would need to add payment of GET and TAT to that section as well. In terms of changing the January 1st, 2020 date, I think by adding payment of GET and TAT, that should really cover those who may not, for whatever reason, be paying the STR rate. They should also be paying GET and TAT. So if they've been doing one or the other as of January 1st, then they should be good. Keep in mind, it's very important for everyone to keep in mind, as the presentation noted, we look at this on a property-wide basis, not on a unit-by-unit basis. So that means in an entire complex, only one property, only one unit will have to have paid GET or TAT or been paying vacation rental tax class for the entire property to be able to do vacation rental. So if a case where no properties have been paying the tax class and no properties have been paying GET or TAT, I don't know that we want to give them several months to start doing that in order for that entire complex to be able to do vacation rental. So we're comfortable with the January 1st, 2020 date. If there are concerns about that date, you could change it to be the effective date of the ordinance. But I'd be afraid of putting it ahead of time because we want to make sure that those people have been doing it as of today. To be paying the proper taxes to the state and to the county. So I think by adding payment of GET and TAT in those two sections is enough. But if the council wants to adjust that date, it could change to the effective date of the ordinance.
Okay, well, thank you, Director, for your feedback on that. And I'm just kind of wondering how many of these apartments, that are currently STRs, were formerly long-term, rentals. I would definitely agree with you on the intent of creating more inventory for long-term rentals on this. So I don't know if you have that number, but I'm sure a lot of them were formerly long-term rentals. And then I guess the lucrative, industry of short-term rentals happened, and I guess more people jumped on that. But then it created a different problem for the county. So anyway, but I state my support for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Molina. Member King, followed by Member Sugimura, followed by Member Hokama.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director McLean, for the bill. I think it's a good bill, and I think it's got good response. I'm glad you're talking to the folks who, have the closest stakeholder group. And as you were talking about moving that date, that was my thought, was to move the date to the effective date, of when the bill gets passed, because there's people who may have been paying GET or TAT in the first part of this year that would be affected if we kept that date at 2020, January 1st, 2020. So, but then that also closes off whatever the rest of the year is left. So I support that, and just wondered if we maybe at some point, Chair, could just get an input from RAM on whether that would serve the purposes that they objected to that date for. For legal purposes.
Are you available to add comment to making it as of the effective date of the bill?
Yeah, so that January 1st, 2021 date, that was just a placeholder. I completely agree with Director McLean and Councilmember King. Putting it at the effective date accomplishes the same thing as far as protecting the equities.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Economu. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Sugimura, you had a comment.
Thank you. So did the department or did we talk to real property tax? We're talking about the implication or the about finance. So did anybody talk to, or are they here on the call? Do we have
Yes,
property tax?
Director Teruya is here.
Sticky about that. So we live.
You
Uh,
got to.
Chair, if I could note, we've been working very closely with real property, probably more than they would want us to. We've gotten a lot of information from them on those lists that we gave with the percentages. That was all information that they provided to us. And I believe they're also encouraged to be working more closely with us so that they can make sure that they're assessing these properties properly.
Okay, and I wonder if Mr. Teruya has a comment on the date. Do you have a thought on the date being effective day of the passage of the bill, or going back to 2020, or do you think 2021? As you know your operation.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Member Sugimura, thank you for that question. Marcy Martin is also monitoring, so I'm not sure if she has a comment to the date, but I don't see any. It's up to the council on whatever date that they want to choose. Passage of the bill, I think that's fine. The question that I have off the bat is a question for Director McLean would be,
I'm watching this really dull.
if I'm an owner of a apartment unit or whatever, that you're trying to show that you've paid GET and TAT, is the returns from the state going to identify what taxes was associated with what unit? I'm wondering, because I don't know if that is true, that you can find that out. So I'm not sure. I just want to throw that out.
Director McLean.
Thank you, Chair. We are used to reviewing GET and TAT information because it's requirements for B&B and STRH permit renewals. I don't know that we have looked at them for condominium units. We would have to see. I admit I'm making somewhat of an assumption that we would be able to determine those tax filings, identify the unit that the taxes are being assessed on. But if we need clarification from the State Department of Taxation, we can seek it, or other verification from the operator. And again, this would be only in those cases where there is a building, because right now, based on the sheets that we've provided you, real property is assessing all of those properties, at least one unit in those properties, at the vacation rental tax rate. So the question of GET and TAT would only come into play for a property that's showing 0% in terms of real property tax, where we would have to say, oh, okay, you have been conducting vacation rentals, so that whole property qualifies. It's not as if we're going to have to be going through thousands of units of GET and TAT reconciliations, because we already have that information from real property. It's just a few instances where they're not paying real property, and we'd be looking for some other kind of verification.
Chair, I appreciate that, and I only bring that out of the caution because I'm not so certain that you can verify a GET tax payment or your TAT payment to a parcel. So I'm just throwing that out as a word of caution to just note that I'm not so certain that your state returns or your filings will identify what property it's associated with. Because if that's true, it'd be much easier for real property to verify that information from the state so that we can go after possible violators of that for the condominium code. That's my only comments initially, Chair, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Member Sugimura, does that satisfy your question?
It's telling us we need to probably amend the HRS and make that. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. But thank you.
Yeah, I did hear one of the testifiers saying that they need to put their TAT registration on their advertisement, so maybe you can cross-reference in that way. But we'll see. I believe it was Mr. Hokama, followed by Mr. Sinensi.
Chair, thank you. I'm happy for you to allow your committee members first opportunity, Chair, and then I'm happy to wait for my turn.
Thank you, Mr. Hokama. Vice Chair Sinensi.
Hello, Chair. Yeah, some of the testifiers today brought up some things about retroactive legislation or the current property use now. And so I guess my question would be to our legal staff. Is there any questions about what maybe some of them had brought up about potentially attracting some legal towards the county?
Mr. Teruya?
I thank you, Chair. I'll also always defer to Corporation Counsel or the legal staff. Just from a real property tax standpoint, I believe you're aware that reassessing and recalculating for taxes could be done for condominiums, but reassessing subdivided parcels are not something that you can do just because they say that they were doing the short-term rental. Subdivided parcels per code, unless you amend the code, doesn't allow for us to go back taxing or back assessing them because it doesn't meet the criteria to do so. So note that condominium properties and subdivided parcels have different ways of classifying themselves. Condominiums are self-attesting, so it's a little different. So just wanted to point that out, Chair. Thank you.
Chair Yimim.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Director Teruya. Mr. Hopper, did you have any comment to Mr. Sinensi's question?
I think Director McLean had addressed that a bit. If you do change that January 1st, 2020 date to effective date of the ordinance, I couldn't possibly see that date having a problem because the intent of the bill is to say it's no new units. So the law becomes effective, and you can't start a new unit after that, which is the intent, and that's something that would deal with that issue. I think if the committee has concerns there.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Mr. Sinensi, is that answer all your questions? Okay. We just have Member Rollins Fernandez and Member Lee that haven't asked yet for this round. Did you have any questions this round?
No. Thank you.
Okay.
We're asked.
Before I call on Mr. Hokama, I just wanted to ask either Director McLean, Mr. Hopper, or Mr. Teruya. I know some of the testifiers said it would muddy the waters to make that GET and TAT apply only to non-condominiumized properties, but I don't want to in a sense, reward those who are not paying their correct property taxes with a grandfathering in of an entire building. So do you see a problem with adding that clause that the or payment of GET and TAT taxes for transient vacation rental use only apply to the non-condominiumized properties and not the condominiumized properties? Whoever would like to take a stab at that.
Chair, this is Michelle McLean. I think that will make it more difficult for existing vacation rental condos to demonstrate their lawful use. Which is contrary to the intent of the bill. making a distinction between condominiumized and not, I don't grasp why that's applicable. As I said before, whether a property is condominiumized or not, whether GET and TAT is paid for the property as a whole, if it's not condominiumized, or if it's paid unit by unit, that is still one method under the bill, as we assume it will be amended, to demonstrate that the use was being conducted. So I don't see a point in making a distinction. Maybe I'm just not grasping it, but I don't see the point.
I can explain the reasoning would be, and maybe Mr. Torrio can explain better than me, but with a condominiumized property, they have to fill out a declaration annually that they are doing short-term rental use. So if they haven't already filled out the declaration, it's like giving them a second chance through this or GET or TAT tax, whereas a non-condominiumized property never had that declaration put on them in the same way that a condominiumized property did. So in effect, if it's not already recorded, they weren't entirely honest on their declaration that they submitted to the finance director, and I wouldn't like to give them the or GET or TAT out. If Director Torrio can confirm that my understanding is correct, because I'm just a newbie here.
I'll give Ms. Martin an opportunity to comment on that.
Ms. Martin, are you available? I don't see her on the call right now.
Chair, I think you're going to have to unmute her.
I see her now. She's unmuted on our end. Can you hear us, Miss Martin? Her video is muted. I can't unmute that, and her sound.
She's on via phone, but she says she.
I don't see a phone number here.
1280.
128. I don't see a phone on the call.
Okay.
But I see her as a computer.
Chair, if I could offer another comment in the meantime, and maybe Mr. Economou can comment further. Even though there is the declaration process for condominiums, I don't know that that's been in place for all that long. And I believe there was the concern that there may be people who, for whatever reason, didn't know, or a relatively new buyer. There might be other reasons where a condominiumized property owner, not being deceitful, but just might not be aware of the declaration. So giving them the option of demonstrating compliance with GET and TAT might be important for those.
That I would like to be friends with, and she emailed me asking if we wanted to be partners.
It's
She took too long.
I'm quite heartened that RAM is supportive of this effort, because this does involve a basic property right, and we want to make sure that we don't infringe on that. They're on board with establishing that right and making sure that people pay their taxes. But I'd be concerned with going too far, because they are supportive of this. So I'd ask what what his opinion is on that and making the distinction between condominiumized and non-condominiumized properties.
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear you.
You're muted, Tamara.
Thank you, Director. We did ask him during the testimony. He said he was okay. He said he thought it could muddy the waters, but he understood the concern, if I recall correctly, when we asked him that the first time.
Chair, if I may, I'd also like to bring up the additional point that classifications of properties are only done effective December 31st of each year. So there are going to be instances where if somebody purchased a property January 1st, 2020, and even if they did self-classify or declare that they were a short-term rental property, that classification wouldn't take effect until January 1st, 2021, to the best of my understanding. So that would still keep the effective date essentially as January 1st, 2020. By not restricting the GET or TAT payments to strictly the non-condominiumized properties, then you avoid any of that issue with the sort of retroactive effect of the law. So once again, I appreciate the intent of changing the effective date and not wanting the TAT or GET payments to be applied to condominiums as well as non-condominiumized properties. But the more that I'm thinking about this and looking at the actual impact of the law, it would be a safer bet for the county to avoid legal challenges if they just allow for the GET and TAT payments to demonstrate lawful TVR use. Because technically, if it's occurring in the apartment district and it meets all those other current qualifications in apartment zoning, then it's lawful. It's just a matter of taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Economu. Mr. Hopper, do you have any feedback on the issue of condominiumized or non-condominiumized if we can't get Ms. Martin on the line?
I wouldn't know as much as finance would about how those classifications would work, and would maybe want to see language and go over that with them. I think the intention, though, with having this in the bill is not necessarily to try to make sure everyone's current on their tax. I think the basis behind it is to use the classification and the payment of GET and TAT tax as evidence that the use was conducted prior to the effective date of the legislation, which cuts off future use. So I think it's being used as evidence that the use was being conducted. So I don't know if it would be better evidence of a condominium in a case of a condominium or not. But I don't believe the intention of that provision was to try to collect those taxes. It was mainly to use that as evidence that someone was conducting the use prior to that use no longer becoming lawful. And again, they've got to meet all the other use requirements, which is the building has to have been permitted before 1989 and certain other things. But I think that was the general. The intention was to deal with the issue of was the use conducted prior to the effective date of the ordinance, and I think that's why that those taxes are being used as that evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Mr. Teruya, it doesn't look like we're going to get Marcy Martin. Did you have any comment on condominiumized versus non-condominiumized?
No, I don't have any comment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hokama?
Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate the discussion and concerns regarding the effective date or the timing. So I have a different concern, Chair, if I can bring up at this time. So I want to thank you and the department, planning department, for making this proposal, Chair Bolton. I appreciate it. One of the things that I wanted to ask, especially with that proposed component of potential grandfathering clause, would that list come from the planning department and planning director for real property to use to verify areas? Is that what I understood when you said the director will provide these things, I think, in your proposed amendment, Chair?
The list would come from the real property tax to the director as a verification of paying the correct short-term rental property tax annually in order for her to issue the registration number. That was the intention in my revised amendment summary form, so that the registration number would be contingent on verification that these short-term rental units are paying their short-term rental property taxes. Because as I understand it, in condominiumized properties, the declaration is the only way that we know that folks are conducting short-term rental use and paying short-term rental property tax.
Yeah. See, because I see it the other way. Planning is the one that takes care of the permitting, the STR applications, the whole bit. Finance is the one that receives whatever is the final decision and then adjusts their program and operations to implement. But they're not the ones that make the call on who gets what. That's planning's job. So I saw your amendment as planning will inform RPT, so the RPT can then make the appropriate adjustments in their programming and records to then make sure that we have the right taxation assessments and collections of revenue. So that was one concern, and I hope we can work that out, Chair. My other concern that ties to what you just shared with me, Chair, is I think one of the problems, so for Mr. Tiruya, I think one of the biggest screw-ups we haven't corrected that we continue to talk about is I don't like, for the condominiums apartments, this bullshit of self-reporting, okay? Self-reporting is only as good as, like I said, how good your accountant is and how truthful you want to be with the county on what you think you should be paying the county on taxes. And so I don't see why we cannot make a uniformity and fairness that everything goes under classification based on highest and best use, and then work it from there. Why do we have properties for subdivision parcels on highest and best use, but for condos, apartments, it's a self-reporting bullshit? Finance Director, you have one comment on that?
Thank you for that, Mr. Okama. We brought the bill up a couple of times. I think that is a question for the council members. It's always been difficult to talk to taxpayers when you have two sets of rules. I think if the council would maybe revisit it and consider it, it would be very much easier for real property tax to classify properties one way, which is based on your highest and best use. That is what we've been saying the entire time because of simplicity and uniformity purposes. Just because you have condominiumized your property, you have a different set of rights. And I think that is one way to hedge what you want to pay. But it also makes more people try to go to condominiumization so they can have a different set of rules. So that is something to consider for the members. That's your choice, Chair.
By request or from our chair, committee chair, have you been able to, in a sense, having some general calculations on what would be the potential revenue impact, plus or minus, good or bad, Director Tiruya? As people made out, we may be 1 year behind on the filings and the collections and whatnot. But again, with this current status of what we have in the code, rules, and regulations, my concern is property owners, since we have no visitors in the hotel resorts and other components. Do you see a lot of requests for reclassification so that they would pay the lower rate? Because now they would say, I'm not doing transient, there's no visitors, so I'm going to reclassify myself in another category, so I pay less.
Chair,
Any thoughts, Mr. Curia?
I don't think I have a calculation. Maybe Ms. Martin has a calculation, and my understanding, Chair, she is on, so she's able to respond. But there is no doubt in my mind, come the end of December of this year, that people will start self-reporting of a non-transient use. So, Mr. Okama, the answer to your question is there will be a substantial loss in revenues should everybody choose to be a non-rental property. Ms. Martin, any comment?
Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
We have already seen many property owners changing their classification from short-term rental to the non-owner occupied class as a result of the COVID restrictions, and we expect the trend to continue as long as the quarantine stays in effect. So there will be a reduction in the amount of properties and therefore a reduction in the value in the short-term rental class for the 2021 assessment.
Director Turia.
Thank you, Chair. And that just further shows the inconsistencies in our code by having two sets of rules is because of a subdivided parcel that may be zoned hotel and no longer can do a transient accommodations. They have no choice but to pay on their zoning. But the condominium person can choose to self-declare something less. And that's the reason why I talk about fairness. I think if we had one way of classifying properties, then everybody would be treated equal. But now we have a situation that just shows itself that could be a flaw in how taxation works with two sets of rules. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Director Terry. And Chair, I appreciate that you allowing the Director to share those comments because I think the members, especially as we wrap up this term and the new members and returning members will be looking at next term, I think that will be one of the new council's biggest challenges. Continued reduction of revenues. Continued reduction. Okay? And my calculations, not finance department, whatnot, is sizable enough, members, that you guys going to feel a big hurt on cash next year. That is me, not the department, not Mr. Turia, not Ms. Martin, just my experience and projections of cash. I think we're going to be in a lot of self-hurt. So, my last question, Chair, I wanted to ask the planning department is currently, what is, Ms. McLean, your process to notify RPT of any changes that would affect the property tax, let's say, such as vacation rentals or others? Does it come from your office as the director notifying finance RPT? Does it come from your short range planning division or whatever it is? Can you tell us how notification is given after final council action and mayor signs off on the ordinance?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Hokama. Anytime we issue a permit approval letter that involves a change of use, we copy finance on that approval letter so that they are aware whether it's a B&B permit, an STRH permit, a conditional permit. a county special use permit from the Planning Commission, an SMA permit from the Planning Commission, any type of approval that could change the use and the improvements on a property, we copy finance on the approval letter. And then if they need more information, they can certainly let us know.
Great. Do you notify any other department for regulatory purposes or requirements such as like water? I mean, whether they go from, let's say, a resident account to a commercial account or something of that nature. Do you also notify any other departments or agencies?
On a case-by-case basis, depending on what the change is and what the impacts might be and how they may have commented on that. B&Bs and STRHs, the only ones we routinely copy is finance. On SMA permits or others that might have conditions that relate to roadway requirements or water system improvements, we would copy those departments on the approval letter so that they're aware.
Okay. And then just so that we're clear, all of us, including myself, who's not an active member of this committee, Director, can you tell me simply what is a non-standalone structure that we're trying to, we're trying to prohibit new standalone structures. I'm trying to understand what is a non-standalone structure.
Are you talking about in the industrial districts?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Because that's one of the pull right in the bill.
Right. We don't want to allow standalone apartments in the industrial district where the only use on that parcel is apartment. It can be combined with another use, some sort of mixed use, a combination of business and commercial, for example. So it wouldn't be purely, solely apartment. There would be some other use combined with it.
Wouldn't that be something more under our other zoning? Shucks, what did John Min and I put in the code? That mixed use thing so you could do commercial, light industrial, as well as a residential component in
the service business
right.
Residential. That's not widely used. Service business residential is not that widely used. Not that many properties have that zoning. There is enough light industrial district zoning that have standalone apartments already. And what we're looking at down the road, that if any light industrial properties are going to be redeveloped, that it's not just for apartments, that it has some combination of commercial use.
No, I understand, and I agree with the intent. I'm with the others trying to maintain a smart residential inventory of units. So I understand the proposal. Thank you for your comment, Director McLean. Chair, I appreciate my opportunity. Thank you so much for letting me ask my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hokama. And based on your questions, if I can clarify, you believe that the planning department should maintain a list of all practicing short-term rental units and not that the finance department should give the planning department the list, because I believe that's currently they don't go by unit when it's zoned available, so they don't know which units are doing short-term rental use, which units are not. So the only way that we have the numbers that we do is from real property tax, and it sounds like that you're not in favor of that. Or Director McLean? Was I not correct in what I'm thinking?
Right now, we do maintain the quote-unquote Minatoya list. And your proposed amendment, because it would amend Title 19, that makes it the planning department's responsibility. If this bill were to pass, though, we would have to go through that list with real property. So I think we would be responsible for the list, but we couldn't do it without real properties input and verification. So that's how I see it going forward.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, that was, I mean, obviously you guys have to work together because how else would we know? And since Ms. Martins just came on the line during Mr. Hokama's question, if you'd like to weigh in at all on, I guess the issue was not including condominiumized units in the payment of DET and TAT because of that self-declaration. Do you find issue with that from a tax perspective? Yes.
So we are working with planning, and we have been in creating these lists, which work very well for condominiums. Our main concern is the non-condominiums that are grandfathered. We aren't being given those properties, so they aren't being classified correctly. So those are the properties that are the unknown that hopefully we can work together to identify those properties and get them classified correctly moving forward.
Okay. So if they show evidence through GET and TAT records, then you can categorize the property as a whole correctly moving forward from the date that this bill passes.
Chair, we will do that moving forward. We don't have a mechanism to tax them for this year or any prior year at this point, but moving forward, if we identify a property, we will reclassify them, make them classified uniformly with their competitive set.
And then for condominiumized properties that show payment of GET and TAT, then you can back assess them to say 2019.
Yes, because they were supposed to by law notify us within 30 days of their use.
Okay. Thank you very much. I had a question for Mr. Hopper, if you folks don't mind. Mr. Hopper, my revised amendment summary form that goes by unit. Just wondering, in your opinion, does that need to go through Planning Commission review?
This was sent to us a couple of days ago. I did get back to the OCS on a response, but I think the intent was to be able to respond today at the meeting. So I did take a look at it. I don't think it's something that's it makes the entire ordinance a fundamentally new proposal. It's something that's within the scope of the review of the grandfathering of apartment units after you're going to make them no longer legal with the legislation today. Some comments I did, so I think you could consider it. If you want to send it to the Planning Commission as a separate item in the future, if this passes, that's something you could do. I do think it's something that you could put in now. It's mostly just requiring registration numbers for units that are. It's part of the grandfathering process. They would have to have these numbers. Now, one way it's a little different from, I think, the current ordinance is that it's looking at the uses unit by unit rather than by building. So I don't know if the planning department has comments on their ability to look at the registration numbers by each unit versus by building, because the current law would say if one unit operated prior to the effective date of the ordinance lawfully, then the whole building can continue to operate lawfully. This would say, yeah, that's true, but every unit that operates has to get a registration number from the department, have that posted, and used in all advertising. And so that's a little different than the building being grandfathered in. The other, I don't necessarily see a legal issue with that. It's more of a, it's more of a sort of different way of looking at the units and how they're grandfathered in. The other issue is that it contains language from the STRH ordinance about enforcement. Number 6 just talks about if you advertise without the unit's number, that's prohibited. That's going to result in enforcement action. And then it goes into A, B, C, and D, which are all similar to what the STRH ordinance says. But when that had come out, I sort of cautioned against adding that in there because it adds different requirements from 19.530.030. It's actually more arduous than 19.530.030 is. It makes the department do more things prior to issuing a violation. So it does create a different process. I suppose if the council wants to do that again, it can. But I'd generally recommend that if you stop at number 6, which would say advertising for a transient vacation rental without the unit's valid transient vacation rental registration number is prohibited as a violation of this title and must result in an enforcement action in accordance with section 19.530.030, and then delete the rest, A through D, that would be a suggestion, depending on how important those subsections are. So that's up to you, but generally in the code, 19.530.030 for the rest of Title 19 serves as the general enforcement provision. So other sections of the code don't say if you violate this, you'll get an NOV under 19.530.030, and here's the prerequisites to getting that. Normally the code section just says here's what you can and can't do, and 19.530.030 as a standalone section says that if anyone violates Title 19, then they can be issued a notice of violation in the process. That's sort of a more general comment.
In the director's administrative rules or something about how they go about the violation of the title as well?
Well, it could be. A lot of that's in 19.530.030. That goes over what has to be in the notice of violation, the process for sending it to the person. Some of the more precise things, like requirements for sending a warning, are in the rules. But the fine amount, the maximum fine amount is in 19.530.030. Other things like that are in there. Again, I think it's up to the council, but it's generally not consistent to every time a new ordinance comes out, say here's the special enforcement process that will happen with respect to it. If you want sort of a universal enforcement process under 19.530.030, certainly if there's issues with that section, the council can amend that section. But that's those are my comments. Again, I don't want to get too much into the manini of it, and maybe the department doesn't even have a problem doing A through D, but it's just a little different than any other section of the code. You just use 19.530.030. If someone does an illegal TVR, you use 19.530.030 and issue an NOV based on that. There's not this requirement for a 7 days notice and things like that, although practically I think the department generally would give a notice of warning based on due process and other HRS requirements. But again, it's a bit different. I didn't want to get too off track here. That's just my comments with A through D. I know they're taken right from the STRH ordinance. So those are my comments. You could look at the registration numbers, but that's a little different than just saying the building is allowed to operate. So it's a bit different of a process.
Thank you. And we did work this through with Director McLean, and she seemed okay with it. Just checking in with either Director Teruya or Miss Marcy Martins. Are you okay to work with the planning department in this form and manner to ensure that all the folks doing the STRH usage are indeed paying their correct short-term rental property taxes? Either Ms. Martin or Director Teruya.
I think I'll defer to Ms. Martin because I think they're already working hand in hand. I don't think we're having any problems working with the planning department, but I'll defer to Ms. Martin.
Okay, Miss Martin, you're unmuted on my end.
Thank you, Chair. We will be working with the planning department, and we have a very successful relationship in this area. We have been working since, I think, 2018 with the planning department in classifying the STRs and BNBs. So I feel confident that we can work together.
Okay, cool. And Miss McLean, nothing popped up between the last time that we spoke and today on this proposed amendment summary form, other than in part 5, I think you wanted it to be each unit located in a property instead of in a building that qualifies for transient vacation rental use.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I emailed your committee staff that wherever the amendment uses the term buildings, it should be replaced with properties, because again, we go on a property-wide basis. And then you're correct in number 5, the registration number should be assigned to each unit. A property qualifies for TVR use. Then when the bill references a registration number, there are a few times that it references a permit number, and that should be registration number instead, not a permit number. But either registration or TMK. And I mentioned that registration number or tax map key number. And I mentioned that because, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but you're probably aware that a couple of hosting platforms have signed agreements with Kauai County about advertising. And those agreements, and I've discussed drafts of agreements with 2 different platforms, and they want to use TMK number. And so to allow this to be consistent with that, and if we do sign such an agreement, we would seek to amend the B&B and STRH codes as well to say that advertising without a permit number or tax map key number, that those are requirements of those. So if we're starting with this, I would ask to add tax map key or registration number has to be used in the advertising so that we can track them.
My question would be, in a tax map key number where there's multiple units, how do we specify which units are doing the short-term rental use and which units may be long-term or owner-occupied? Because isn't the tax map key for the property and not for the specific unit in those condominiumized units? How would it work out?
If you look at a regular tax map key number like you're used to looking at, in condominium, most of those technically have 4 zeros at the end. If a property is condominiumized, those 4 zeros become 1, 2, 3, 4, up to however many in a building. So because it's a tax map key, that's what finance uses to tax the individual units in a condo.
Okay, so just to clarify, instead of registration number, tax map key number, and instead of buildings, properties, and we're working off the revised amendment summary form that Anna posted second. It's under committee chair correspondence to the Department of Corporation Counsel. It's the last one that Anna had posted in the chat. Miss Lillis.
Yeah, that's the one I'm looking at.
Awesome.
Buildings get changed to property in number 5, registration number to each unit. And then where a registration number is cited, it should be registration number and not permit number. And in ads, it should be registration number or tax map fee number. It can be either one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hopper, you had something to say?
Well, just a comment. Now that I'm looking at this, is the intention to prohibit operation without one of these numbers? That you need to get a number to operate?
That you need to pay your correct property taxes to operate.
Well, right, you would need the registration number to operate. Because right now it prohibits advertising without the registration number. It doesn't prohibit operating without the registration number. If the intent is to allow people who are grandfathered to continue operating to get these numbers, I would think you would, since that's not required now, I don't know how long it would take the planning department to get all of them with registration numbers to allow them to continue to operate. So, you may want to consider changing it to make clear that you can't operate without this number, without a registration number verifying that you're paying real property taxes. And B, to give the owners time and the department time to assign those numbers. Because if the idea is to say, if you don't have a number, you shouldn't be operating, that's a new requirement that doesn't apply right now. So that's something that I hadn't thought of previously. But if you're not going to be allowed to operate until you get this number verified, the question would be how long will that take for the county to get all that verification in? And in the meantime, what will? And I'm not saying that people should be not paying real property taxes, but the act of getting a number and having that verified and put into a system where the department can verify that. May be an issue. That's one I hadn't previously thought of, but if that's the intention, I'm not sure how that would work. If there's language you would want to put in that would allow sufficient time for the department to do that, and then say after a certain date this will become effective, or how you'd want to go about that. But that's something that I just had realized, that if you can't operate without this number, then that would be a consideration, or if there's going to be a time frame before that becomes effective after this date.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper, for your observation. Director McLean, how long would you anticipate this taking to roll out? And what, if any, date should we put on this?
I think maybe for number 5, it could start by saying within 1 year of the effective date of this ordinance. I think a year would be plenty of time. I don't believe the intent, and please, we need to make this clear. I don't believe the intent is that operation is prohibited without a registration number. To me, that's something that probably would have to go to the plan commissions, because that is very different than what we've been talking about. What we've been talking about so far is establishing this lawful use. And now we're saying, if you don't include a registration number in your ads, you're no longer lawful. That's very different than what the planning department has been representing and what the goal of the bill is. So, it's a good point to be clarified, and if that is what's desired, I would ask Mr. Hopper to comment on whether, if that's what you intend, Chair, whether that should go back to the planning commissions.
Okay, thank you. I'll take Mr. Taruya first.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for the director. About how many properties or units are we talking about?
Issuing the registration number, and Jackie can jump in with the number because I have all these spreadsheets. There are roughly 5,500, I believe, that are lawfully operating now that we would be issuing registration numbers for. And then, as we said in the presentation, there are quite a few more that are entitled to do that use. So if they choose to start doing that use, we would have to issue numbers to them as well. But as of today, they're about 5,500.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Truya, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, Chair. I'm just trying to think because we're going to have to work with them in issuing that number into our system, possibly even populating that on our website. Where do we put that into our field so that we can either cross-reference? I know I'd hate to change our entire system of doing tax map key numbers, but it's just a matter of working with them and making sure that we can make sure that the permit number, whatever number you guys talk about, is associated with a TMK number. And how do we display that publicly on our website so that both planning can see it, or easily somehow be able to do a query to pull all that information to them so that they can do their own reference as well. So I'm just trying to think internally. I'm sure we're going to figure it out. I just was wondering about how many parcels we're talking about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Member King, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do have a comment on Director McLean's earlier comment about requiring.
Did you call me?
Whether we're talking about the registration number being required for advertising or for operating. And I have kind of conflicting views on that because I've been working on the last couple of years trying to get some state legislation passed that enables the counties to enforce on these platforms. And
I'm sorry,
they can't even agree. I've been told by some legislators, oh, you can do that. And then when I tried to get an opinion from the Attorney General, I was told, no, you don't have the authority to do that. The counties don't have the authority. So the jury's kind of out on whether we even can require these platforms to make their. I mean, they can require their clients who post to do certain things, but whether we can make them is another thing. But my other concern, which is kind of the opposite side of that, is the point of asking them to have a registration number is so we can differentiate the legal operations from the illegal ones. So how do we do that if we can't force them to put it on their advertising? How do we use that registration number? Is that just an internal thing that we're using so that we know that if we see something, I mean, we're still going to see advertising. If we don't require it for operations, and we're going to still see advertising that might have that registration number or might not, and we won't know what's legal and what's not legal. So I don't know. Just do you have any thoughts on that, Director McLean, of how the end goal is we're not trying to create busy work for people or make life harder. We're just trying to figure out how we can differentiate the legal properties from the illegal ones. So, I just wanted to get your thoughts on.
I wonder if the question too is a property, obviously by zoning, they're legal to conduct short-term rental, but if they're not paying their property tax, are they still considered legal or illegal? I think is the underlying root of your question. And
mine was more encompassing of not just the Minatoya list or these ones, but just overall, if we're going to make this requirement, or are we just talking about making this requirement for these apartment zoned and condominium zoned properties? Because it's a larger problem of trying to differentiate the legals from the illegals, and that's why I've been asking for a few years now. Is there some way just to give everybody who is on that list a number? So and then require everybody to use the number. So we know that if we see an ad, is there some way so that if we see an ad that doesn't have a registration number or a permit number, or whatever we're using, that we know that that's an illegal operation, and then that makes it easier to go after them. Because otherwise, you have to do a lot of research for these ads to figure out if they're legal or not legal.
Well, I think the search engine is given a list of all the TMKs that are legal by zoning, ordinance, and various other means. So the purpose of my amendment was to ensure that those properties that are legal by apartment zoning, to ensure that they're also paying their correct short-term rental property tax. So to me, they're all legal. The search engine knows, but I I guess to me the question is, are they still legal if they're paying non-owner occupant or homeowner exemption?
What my question was how do we look at an ad and know if they're on that list or not, and know if they're legal or not? Because it's hard for tourists who are booking these places to see an ad and know if it's on that property that's legal, or maybe it's a complete separate house. And I've been hearing from some people, not recently, since the pandemic hit, but where they see an ad, they come here and they're in a completely different unit than what they saw on the ad, and it's falling apart or it's flea ridden or something like that. So people have not been very happy with some of those. So it's kind of the issue for me is, if you look at an ad and it says it's in the zoning, you would know that if you had a registration number, okay, this is a legal operation, whether it's a condominium or a standalone house or anything, you would know that. But right now we don't have that. I just want to, I'm just trying to help figure out how do we make sure we're going after the right people who are doing things illegally and, not the people who are legal.
Director McLean?
Thank you, Chair. Because the B&B and STRH laws say that advertising is evidence of operation, ads and lawfulness are intertwined. With the apartment districts, the use is allowed if certain standards are met. So it's not a question of lawfulness. And I'd be concerned with putting in an advertisement requirement for the operation itself to be lawful. With payment of taxes, if the use is lawful but they're not paying their correct tax, then that's something for Director Taruvia's people to enforce and go after. With the proposed amendment, it's saying if you advertise, you have to include a permit number or a registration number or TMK number. So if they don't do that, then it's a violation of that provision of the code, but it doesn't mean their operation is unlawful. Their operation is still lawful. They're just violating a requirement of putting that number in the ad. That's how I read it. So it's three different things. One is tax, one is use, and one is, does your ad have the information that it needs to? And to me, those are three distinct things for the apartment districts.
And do you think we can, under current law, state law, that we can require certain things to be put in ads? I mean, can we make an ordinance that says that the ads have to include this without being viewed as trying to regulate the platforms, which is what the state.
I see Mr. Hopper.
Maybe Mr. Hopper. Yeah. So is that something, Mr. Hopper? Because we've been, you and I have been working on that original legislation that we tried to get the state to pass to allow counties to regulate the hosting platforms, and we still haven't got that passed yet. So can we legally pass an ordinance that requires certain things on advertisements in our county? That maybe don't say name the hosting platforms, but we say this is what the ads have to say. I don't know. Can we do that?
I had raised my hand on another item that Director McLean raised, but I can certainly address your question. The requirement in the code currently for STRHs says that the permit number has to be in the advertising. If that doesn't happen, then the violation is issued against the operator. It's generally not issued against the platform, and I think the platform may have defenses in that case. But the issue is the operator is the one who's doing the advertising without the valid permit number. So the violation would be against the operator. The other issue that other counties are dealing with is whether, and this happened in California, whether the county can require online platforms to verify before they post the ads that the operation is permitted. That's a separate issue from saying that if the operator advertises without a permit number, you can go after the operator. because the operator holds the permit and they're the ones subject to the permit. So in general, the enforcement would not be against the platform itself. And that's where the state legislation was sought to say, if you're a platform, you've got to verify before placing, not before placing the ads, but you have to verify before you take money from a operation that they are a lawful operation. That's what happened in California that was upheld. So those are two little different things. Right now, the code does allow the county to pursue a violation against someone operating a STRH that doesn't have a permit. And as part of that, if they advertise without a permit number and they're unpermitted, then that can happen. That's a little different than I think Director McLean was talking about in this case. That's a little different. These aren't uses where you've got to get a permit to do them. These are uses that are grandfathered permitted uses. And so I wanted to address Director McLean's issue, but since Member King asked that question, I'll address that.
Okay. Can I finish my line of questioning first, Chair? Because I wanted to, because you seem to indicate, Mr. Hopper, that there's already something in the code that says that they have to have a permit number on their ad.
Yeah, 1965 of the code does say that advertising without the permit number is prohibited, but generally the enforcement there is against the operator. It wouldn't be against the platform, and I would have legal concerns pursuing Airbnb or posting that ad because of federal law, and there's California case law on those issues.
Okay, but isn't that what we're talking about with Chair Paulton's proposal, is to require the either registration or permit number on the ad, but you're saying that's already in the code?
Oh, that's in the code for short-term rental homes that get short-term rental home permits. Okay. Yeah, this is grandfathering units, old units in apartment districts.
Okay, so this would be, so we're talking about a whole different classification, and for me, the difficulty that we're having is just people not knowing that a particular unit that shows up in an ad is in an apartment that's in a zoned area. So how do you identify that so that people booking these places know that they're booking a legal operation and not an illegal one? So that's where I just have a problem with not putting anything on the ad that shows that they're legal and they're permitted, or they don't need a permit or whatever, that they're operating legally, because people don't know the difference when you just show, when some of these ads are not even accurate with the pictures of the rentals, and they're showing a house and they end up in a condo, or vice versa. So anyway, that's my big concern, because I've been hearing those kinds of complaints in the past. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Member Hukama?
Chair, thank you. Great comments, great concerns by the various members, Chair. I just wanted to bring up one point, because I would agree with my fellow colleagues of the committee. I would ask Mr. Tiruya, one thing that council has supported you, I would say over the last 6 years, has been resources to improve the ability of RPT, Real Property Administration, to improve accuracy, timeliness, fairness in our program. So one of the things I know we supported RPT was with the ability to move forward with 3D GIS capacity that we've paid for, you've implemented, you've brought us more than the conservative revenue projections you presented us, so we have more revenue than prior. I wanted to ask you now, can our investment of software assist you with showing inconsistencies in use versus classification? And with our 3D project, can we have that so that eventually we could publish and make that open to the public, Mr. Tiruya? Because I know we're halfway there. You've shown us some in the past, some presentations where you even went down to within the unit the difference between the living room space versus the storage, your view planes and everything else. So I'm wondering if we have the capacity to incorporate some of these concerns for this proposal in what we've invested in your program.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hakama, for that comment. It is true. I mean, I don't see us being very far away or far away at all. I can check with our Esri Canada people. We are close to completing our 3D project of every condominium in Maui County, including possibly showing structures to that point. But the condominium aspect, to thematic map all of our 23,000 plus condominium units geospatially with XYZ coordinates and individual polygons is possible. So as maybe Director McLean works with real property in putting these numbers into our database, we should be able to thematic map that data geospatially by unit. So if that helps the members or the public or anybody, and you feel that we should service that to the public, we would just need to work with our vendor in posting that through our website, through another layer. It would really help to get planning departments, zoning information versus the old paper that you used to be, to also thematic map inconsistencies of their data versus our classification. So that would be, I mean, I don't think we're very far. I would just need to report back to our Esri Canada people and see how we can serve that to the community via our existing website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Great news, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to hear that comment from Finance Director, because I believe we made some smart investments, and to know that that program has the capacity to expand and take care of some of the concerns of this committee's membership. I appreciate it, because for the record, I'll just state my position here. I would agree with the planning director. There's three components, but I don't see them independent. I see them all part of ensuring that the one thing, the use, is legal and in compliance and up to date in their payment of taxation to the county. And so you don't do one of the three. In my book, I'm happy to give you the sledgehammer. Okay, you're asking for a use that normally isn't granted, in that zoning. So, like I said, I don't have a problem with sledgehammers. Okay, I'm not into the sugar and the candy, and I'm not into the cane anymore. I'm into the hammers. I would appreciate it. And then, Mr. Tira, it could also show the inconsistencies in use versus classification, our 3D program.
Yeah, I believe so. I think I don't think it would be very difficult for them to identify those as coloring the one use versus colorization of the existing classification, and a third color for inconsistencies. I don't believe that would be very difficult for our software company to do that reporting for us. So I can do the inquiry back and report back to committee or the chair as to what we can show either internally or service the public on top of our website that most people know of, the realpropertytax.com website. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you, Director. Yeah, I would ask our committee chair, Ms. Paulton, or maybe in conjunction and coordination with our budget chair, Rollins Fernandez, maybe between the two of you, you could allow RPT to report back to us of the ability of the capacity to take care of some of the committee's concerns this afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you, Member Hokama. At this time, we're close to 12, and I'd just like to do a temperature check from the members. I think we seem to be okay now with the amendments as Director McLean proposed. Just maybe sending the prior to, and then put the date that this bill passes on. Temperature check on the amendment. Would members like to try and include that, or would we prefer to send it to the Planning Commission? Member King.
I'm happy to include it and pass it on to council. If there's further comments when we get to council, we can hear them then and address them. But it's been a pretty full discussion to me. If we want to, I'm ready to vote on it.
Deleting the A through D and just like how Mr. Hopper recommended, just leaving it at advertising for a transient vacation rental without the unit's valid transient vacation rental registration number or TMK number is prohibited. Violation of this title and must result in an enforcement action, and then adding in the within 1 year of effective date of this ordinance.
Yeah, I would be okay with that, Chair. I think that's a good.
Okay, so those would be the two changes to the amendment summary from Mr. Hopper.
Yeah, just what I was going to say before is that Section 7 of the ordinance is, I think, the key language. It says that the director must terminate or suspend a transient vacation rental registration number upon the request of the operator or owner of the unit, or if the real property tax classification is not short-term rental. So does that mean that the person can't operate anymore if that gets suspended because they're not RPT classification? That's the clarification I was looking at. Right now it says you can't advertise. I know Director raised concerns saying you would need this to operate. So, I mean, there's a couple of things. Is the intention to come up with a registration number so you can track everybody who's grandfathered, and that's it? And then real property tax classification is handled separately, and if they're not paying that, they can be pursued for the violation of the tax code. Or are you saying that your registration number is suspended if you don't pay your taxes, therefore you lose your non-conforming use status, or you have to stop? That's a little bit more of something to be looked at, but that's sort of what the Section 7 says. So those are right now it says that you lose your number if you're not classified correctly in the real property taxes, and so I don't know what the consequences of that is, that you can't advertise. And I don't know if that also means you can't operate. And again, a separate option would be to amend this to say it's more of a registration process to confirm that you are grandfathered properly, and then include that in all advertising. But because it's tied to real property taxes, and if you don't pay your taxes, you're not allowed to do the use anymore. That's a little different. So having that all clarified and made clear, I think would be helpful, particularly with the directors, raising the concerns about what I do think the bill does, which is to say that if you don't have that number, you're not allowed to operate. But again, that should all be clarified before the council decides if it's okay with that or not okay with that. And the 1 year period, I understand, makes sense, and the department can come back to the council if that's not enough time and get that amended, or you can send it to the Planning Commission. That's always an option too. But I just wanted to raise that Section 7 it is I think the key provision there, because it says that the director suspends that number if you're not paying real property taxes.
I thought Mr. Hokama made it pretty clear that the intent would be compliance. So, I guess they can still do the usage, but they need to pay their correct property taxes and come into compliance that way. So, if they're going to continue with the usage, like I think he said, real property tax is going to come to collect.
And then this would also tell the planning director that they would have to rescind any approval number. And I presume that means that the person's no longer allowed to operate. In number 7, it says Director must terminate or suspend a transient vacation rental registration number if the real property tax classification is not short-term rental. So just pointing out that language there, that's what was intended, I presume, but that's what it says.
Okay, thank you, Member Hokama.
Chair. I think one important question Mr. Hopper can assist all of us, including Ms. Kama and myself, who doesn't vote on this committee, is Mr. Hopper. The property owner reclassifies STR to non-owner use, and they file it. Department receives it, accepts it, makes the appropriate change of classification. Does that STR permit then automatically cease and desist because the classification now no longer exists on the real property? They reclassified. So does the old STR approval still exist, or now it's like a filing? It's done. It's over. You want to do the use again, you got to reapply because you changed your classification on your own. All right, see, Mr. Teruya.
Mr. Teruya?
Chair, I apologize for making this comment, but I think what I'm hearing is that the committee would like to see them pay their fair share if they're getting this approval. And I'm not sure if there should be language in there such that in the event of any calendar year that this use is being done, that they be recalculated and adjusted for taxes accordingly. I'm not sure. That way, because if you're doing it after a calendar year, we assess as of January 1. Potentially, if you start in March, then you know what's going to happen to you is that in that calendar year you're going to be reclassified and reassessed according to that use, which would be that short-term rental use. I'm not sure if that helps. If additional language would help the members. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so another temperature check. How are we feeling? Do we still want to go ahead with this amendment summary form, or would you like me to reintroduce it as a freestanding bill with a little bit more tweaking? Member
Chair, can we have Ms.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
If you don't mind, Ms. King, I just wanted to ask Mr. Hopper, did he have an answer? What happens on the reclassification with the STR status?
If you've got an STRH permit, that ordinance says you need to pay your TAT taxes and GET taxes and real property taxes. So I think that in a case of an STRH permit, there would be a basis to rescind because you're not in compliance. This, however, is different. These are grandfathered outright permitted uses. And so the council would be looking to say, generally, I do not believe failure to pay taxes would result in the loss of the use if you were lawfully conducting the use. The use is whether or not under the zoning ordinance that use is allowed. The property taxes, are you paying your fair share of taxes? Now, I don't think, though, that would prohibit the committee, if it wanted to, from tying the two together. If you wanted to look at saying continued lawful use is permitted, but after a certain period of time, we're going to check for real property tax classification and see if you don't have that classification, you're going to lose your grandfathering of use. That's generally.
So, excuse me, Mr. Hopper, but I just need to let Councilmember Paulton know, because I've got to leave in a couple minutes, that at this point where we're at, my preference would be to have you come back with a clean bill that includes the amendments, and let us vote on one bill, because we've got all these different ideas coming in and out of our sphere right now. So. But I do need to leave, and I've got a 12 o'clock commitment.
Okay, here's my recommendation. I recommend that or the committee members, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend passage on first reading of PSLU 59 transient vacation rentals in the apartment, light industrial, and heavy industrial districts, with the change of date to be effective when this bill passes. So a bill for an ordinance amending chapters 19.12, 19.24, 19.26, and 19.37 Maui County Code related to transient vacation rentals in the apartment districts and industrial districts and dwelling units in the industrial districts, incorporating any non-substantive revision and filing of this County Communication 20-246. And so this also includes or payment of GET and TAT taxes and amendments to Section 10. So we'll hold the ASF for another time.
Okay, so sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, I'm sorry, I had to leave to go to another quick meeting, and I'm back. But I basically agree with that, and that's what the department recommended. Also,
I don't have a motion yet.
Oh, so, sorry. I so moved then.
Second.
Okay, moved by Member Sugimura, seconded by Vice Chair Sinensi. Member Sugimura, as the move on discussion.
So just so I'm clear, right? We basically are taking what the department recommended, deleting the date, and putting it in at the passage of the ordinance. That was a change, and adding in GET, TAT also, which is what the department recommended. And your amendment, we're going to take up at another time, correct? Okay, I agree with that. Thanks.
The motion. Seeing none, I'll call for a question. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed, say no, and raise your hand. So it looks like the motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 6 ayes, 1 excused, Member King. And we included the filing in your motion. And so, members, this concludes today's Planning and Sustainable Land Use Committee meeting. Thank you very much, committee members. The time now is 12:03.